I want to be
promoted,
happy at what I do,
more successful,
a better employee,
able to learn a new skill.
Learning
is lifelong.
Learning is fun.
Learning
makes the difference.
I want to apply what I've learned.
It's not what you learn that makes a difference. It's applying what you learn that makes a difference.
I know what I want.
I know where I'm going.
I'm going for it.
I'm gonna do it.
Today.
Success in our careers and personal lives often depends on our people skills. Our ability to understand the needs and motives of others as well as ourselves can help us reach that success. Using the SELF profile, Speaker Randall Wright focuses on the knowledge that will help you communicate more clearly and in turn build relationships. His strong background in marketing helps you relate these skills to your own situations. Thank you for joining us for Understanding Team Dynamics, How to Work with People. We work with many different personality types. As you watch this scene, see if our characters' communication styles seem familiar.
Listen up. We've got 4 weeks to come up with a campaign for the Bubble Master 2000. We got to get moving on this.
But these are just the preliminary findings from our focus groups. I really think we need to get back into the lab.
Well, forget the lab. They've already done their job. Like Ross says, we need an advertising campaign. And I think we ought to go big on this one. I mean, really break out of the norm and do something different.
What? I don't know.
Wait a minute. I think Jim has a good idea. Look, I don't care what we do as long as we're on time and it works. But I think we should stick to what we know.
Oh, come on.
Wait a minute. We're not getting anywhere. We have to work together on this.
I think before we do anything, we need to get more information. I mean, the demographics are showing that different age groups are responding differently to the size and shape of the gum.
I agree.
Where did you
And
get
if
that?
that's true,
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Whatever time it is where you are, I hope it is a good time. My name is Randall Wright, and I promise you that the time that we are going to be spending together is going to be a good time. And I'll tell you why I'm going to make that promise. Because we're going to be learning while we are together. And any time that you are learning, that is a good time. Okay? We bring with us 3 sets of skills wherever we go. Our technical skills, our organizational skills, and our people skills. Don't know who said it, but someone made the remark once that a modern-day definition of a miracle is when 2 people clearly communicate. This training series is going to focus on developing more of our people and our verbal skills. So much of the success that we have in our careers and in our personal relationships is dependent upon our verbal and our people skills, and this is what we're going to focus on throughout the entire training series, okay? I want to ask you to consider that what you have in front of you is an extremely multi-purpose tool. It has a lot of uses. You have in front of you the SELF profile. One of the tools that you will be able to use the SELF profile for is that it will help you so that you can speak to another person so they will hear or see what is important to them. Let me repeat it, okay? The SELF profile is a tool that you can use so that you can speak and act to another person, so as a result, they will hear and see what is important to them. If you can speak and act to a person so they will hear and see what is important to them, you're making a major step towards allowing a modern-day miracle to happen. When a person sees or hears that they're being spoken to, they are going to demonstrate to you the most amazing of behaviors. For example, they will begin to listen to what you have to say. They will also let you have your say, and they will also begin to judge you as not being the barrier that they thought you were going to be. All because you were able to speak to them and act to them in such a way that they would hear and see what is important to them. Okay? Let me ask you, when a person, or let me tell you, that when a person realizes that you are listening to them, and when you can get another person to listen to you, you are making the foundations of a modern-day miracle occur. I'll tell you why. When you can get a person to listen to you, you are building trust. And whenever we can build trust and we can build talk, we can make a modern miracle happen, okay? Let me put it to you in a very non-grandiose style, okay? How do you get through a person's thick skull? Whether they're at work or at home, whether they're a customer or a boss or a coworker or a staff member, a spouse, a kid, the neighbor. How do you get through a person's thick skull? Here's how you get through their thick skull. You speak to them and you act to them so they will hear and see what is important to them. Now you may very well ask, why is it that speaking to a person and acting to a person is so important? And the answer is in psychology. Psychologists say that the reason why people respond to that is because they are hearing and seeing needs being met. And people want their needs to be met. Now I'm going to give you 4 broad categories of needs, and we'll revisit them in the second module. But broadly speaking, people have 4 categories of needs. They have a need for recognition, they have a need for control, they have a need to belong, and they have a need to be neat and or right. Okay? Let me give you a pop quiz here real quickly, okay? Whenever you practice at something, do you get better or worse at that something that you're practicing? Better, you betcha. It's 100%. It's a learning one-way street. Whenever you practice at something, whatever that something is, you're going to get better. Now, we will go through, learning curves, I think the fancy word is consolidation. I call it confusion, where we don't think we're getting better, but we actually are. We're just simply rearranging the neurons. We're putting the information into place. Now, I know I am a stranger, and I know that a stranger can make a promise that means nothing, okay? But I'm asking you to consider the following promise from a total stranger, and that promise is this, okay? I promise you that whenever you practice using the SELF profile, you will get better. I promise you 100% of the time, whenever you practice the SELF video, you will get better, and you will get better at understanding what other people's behavior is telling you, and also better at understanding how people are interpreting your behavior. Okay? I know this works. I'll tell you how come I know, because I have used it. Real briefly, just a piece of history. Several years ago, I got involved into a business deal that I admit, I did not do proper due diligence on, and wound up getting involved in with a kind of a quasi-boss by the name of Bob. And he was also the quasi-boss from hell. Okay? This guy and I yelled at each other constantly. We did, to put it very succinctly, we did not get along. The only time that we would listen to each other is when we were listening for the gotchas, because we were very much against each other, okay? But in fact, to give you an idea of how bad it got, Bob, who was much, much taller than I am, one day he was yelling and screaming at me. And what he did was this. He goes, "I wished you weren't so short so I could hit you and not be accused of child abuse." Actually, that was a kind of a witty statement, okay? Let me give you one that was not so witty. A few days later, I found myself in traffic, turning the radio down in my car and yelling and cursing about Bob to the top of my lungs. Not so witty. I'll tell you what I began to realize. I began to realize that in spite of all of my technical skills and my organizational skills, they were not being appreciated, they were not being used. Why? Because my verbal skills had been kind of put on autopilot. I had not been developing those. I will offer to you, and I just want you to think about it for an instant, okay? But I will offer to you that the times when you feel unappreciated, when your technical skills and organizational skills and all of your efforts are unappreciated, at least in part, it can be because your verbal skills have gotten in the way. We neglect them. And I'll tell you why I think we neglect them. Because we're in a culture that is so technically oriented, and we put such a claim on our technical skills that we have oftentimes forgotten our verbal and our people skills. Not in this series. We're going to really stay focused on those. If we develop our verbal and our people skills, our ability to work with others, our ability to work with our boss, our ability to work with our coworkers, ability to work with staff and people at home is greatly improved. It'll better our work relationships, and it'll better our personal relationships also. I promise you this. I've been using this SELF profile for 6 years. I am not the same person now that I was 6 years ago. Bob is probably still the same person, but I am changed, okay? How many of you have ever bumped into a Bob? I suspect that the reason why a lot of us are here and why we're watching the video is because we have gotten a Bob in our life. And not only do they affect our verbal skills, but they also affect the amount of stress that we have. They affect our eating and our sleeping and our drinking habits. And you put all those together, we're saying that these people are affecting our peace of mind. I will also promise you this. You develop this SELF profile. You develop the skills that are in it, and your ability to handle stress greatly improves. You still may eat and drink, but maybe not as much, and certainly not for stress-reducing behaviors. And you're certainly going to have more peace of mind. One form of definition of peace of mind is to define it as freedom from fear and guilt and anger. And the SELF profile will help you communicate. It will help you be able to make little miracles happen, and that's bound to give us more peace of mind. I'm telling you, every one of us have got a Bob. Now, they may not be yelling at us. It may be the kind of Bob who, speaks very nicely to us and then, talks about us behind our back, or just lies straight to our face. There's all kinds of Bob-like behaviors out there, but they're just waiting for us waiting to ambush us. And we've got to stay, and we've got to develop our ability so we can handle these people. Finally, a final thought here, a real quick summation about Bob. First off, a lot of people have asked me this. This guy is real. I am not making him up. There is such a guy as the name of Bob, okay? And for what it's worth, he's probably doing very well. Okay? I have a wish for you, and I know this will sound like a mean wish, and it's not at all, okay? But if you don't have a Bob, I wish for you to bump into a Bob. Okay? Why? So maybe it'll kind of make the light switch go off and say, whoa, I need to start developing my verbal and people skills. Because you can say what you want to about these Bobs that are out there. If we begin to look at them as an opportunity and as a kind of a bellwether signal that we need to be developing our skills, it kind of brings it to our attention and we begin to develop our skills better. Okay? So, I wish for you a Bob. Now then, to help you when you do bump into a Bob, you have in front of you this SELF profile. And what I would like you to do is to take some time, and I'd like you to do the SELF profile. I'm going to give you some directions, some instructions, and I'm going to let you take a couple of minutes and actually do the SELF profile, okay? There are 24 questions on one page, and then there are 6 scenarios on another page. What we want you to do is to read each of these scenarios, and then what we would like you to do is to give your response. Now, your response is going to be a number, either 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. Let's see if I remember these. 1 means it's not at all like you. 2 is it's somewhat like you. 3, it's occasionally like you. 4, it's frequently like you. And 5, it's always like you. Okay? Now, quickly, this is a test. I mean, you know and I know it's a test. We call it a profile, but it's a test. Now, there's no way you're going to flunk this test. There's no way you're going to look bad on this test. And there's no way that I'm going to make you send in your results and we're going to publish the results of this test to everybody. I want you to give it your honest answer, okay? And give it your gut response. Don't dwell on it. Give it your gut response. Now, before you get started on this, I want you to think of a communications challenge that you've had either at work or at home. Don't blend the two together. Separate them, either at work or at home. And this is how I want you to answer the questions that you have in front of you. Thinking of a situation or a person either at work or at home. Don't blend the two of them, okay? Let me see, make sure I make this really clear to you. There's no way you're going to look bad on this test. And there's no way you're going to flunk this test. Give it your honest answers, okay? There's a lot of information we can discern from this. Okay, I'm going to leave you alone for just a little bit, and I'll let you do the profile. A major tool that you can use to help you deal with Bobs is this SELF profile. The SELF profile, all it does is this. It just simply says that we can take human behavior and we can kind of put it into 4 broad, predictable categories. And we're going to call these behaviors S's, E's, L's, and F's. We're going to say that some people have an S characteristic, an E characteristic, an L, or an F characteristic, okay? This instrument was developed at the University of Kansas in 1987. It has a reliability index of 87%, and it's been given to over 300,000 people. I swear, I've given it to at least that many of them over the years. Now then, you've gotten 2 columns of numbers. Some of your numbers are actually letters, either an A or a B, and I'd like you to convert those into numbers. So for every A, change that to a 5. And for every B, change that to 1, and be sure that you include those in your totals. Okay? You have now 2 columns in front of you. For every A, I'd like you to convert that to 5 points. So just change the A to the number 5. For every B, I want you to change that number to the number 1. And be sure that you include these letters, now these numbers, in your total. Okay? After you have your totals, you're going to have a chart right below that so that you can convert your 2-digit total into a single-digit number. You have 2 totals in front of you. Let's just say, as an example, that one of your totals is the number 49. That would convert to a number 4, based on the chart below you. Okay? If you have the number, let's say a total of 72, that would convert to the number 6. You now have a directive score and an affiliative score. Okay? Let me just give you a quick comment on directive and affiliative. Directive is just simple business jargon, meaning how much you like to have a say in what is going on, how much you like to have some control of what's going on around you. Okay? Affiliative is fancy business jargon, just simply means how much you like to be around people, how much you like to work with people. Okay? Whatever your scores are just fine. What I'd like you to do now is to take your directive score and your affiliative score, and I want you to plot them. You will find in your profile a chart that has, a graph that's going to be an XY graph. It will have an up and down line and a side to side line. What I want you to do is on the up and down line, on your directive line, I want you to find your directive score, and I want you to put a spot right on that number. Find your affiliative score on the horizontal, the side to side line. Find your affiliative score on that line and put a spot on that number. The next step is I want you to connect those 2 spots with a straight line so that you're now making yourself a triangle. And just to make sure you know where your triangle is, go ahead and just fill it in with your pen or your pencil so you can kind of clearly see where your triangle is. Okay. The size of your triangle. Okay. Generally speaking, this is just a generalization, but generally speaking, the bigger your triangle, what that says is that you are this particular way most of the time. Now, there's a lot to be said for being consistent, but sometimes there is something to be wary of when you're too consistent. Because if your triangle is too big, what that can suggest is that you're locked in to just one way of communicating. Okay? If your triangle is a smaller triangle, how that is interpreted, it means that you are more flexible. It is easier for you to shift gears and go from one style to another style. It's easier for you to respond to people when they are different than you are. Now, that can be good and that can be bad. If you have a triangle that is too small, okay, that could also mean that you're wishy-washy, okay, which is a very unpsychological term. But it means that, maybe you won't tell people what you need. You won't stand up for what you want. Okay? Now, I'm also asking you to consider another way to interpret a small triangle, and that is that it could mean that you are moving from one style to another style. Because in point of fact, we do change as we gain experiences, as we accumulate, life. Okay? So I'm asking you to consider that a small triangle can also mean that you're moving into another form, another style of behavior. I know I've made you go through some paperwork, and I know I've made you do a little bit of math. But it was just a little bit of paperwork, it was just a little bit of math. But it was paperwork and math that is going to give us a huge benefit. It is going to give us a way of how we can begin to understand how behavior can be evaluated and how other people are evaluating our behavior. So as a result, we can make little miracles begin to happen with the people that we work with, whether the bosses, coworkers, staff, etc., or even the people that we live with, family, spouse, kid, even the neighbors down the street, even the neighbor down the street with the dog that's barking at 2 a.m. Continue with this learning module. If you can pick it up in just if you can fast forward and get to the second learning module, we're going to start explaining what the S, the E, the L, and the F profile, what those characteristics mean, and what behaviors they tell us, and how we can interpret those behaviors, okay? You've been real good. Let's just get into the next module.
By understanding and practicing the SELF profile, you'll communicate better at work and at home. You'll better understand what people's behavior is telling you and improve your ability to speak to other people to get your point across. The profile will also enable you to see how other people are judging your behavior. We each have a directive and an affiliative score. The directive score measures a person's need and tendency to direct and control situations. The affiliative score measures how much you need and desire to be around others. After plotting the results of the directive and affiliative scores, you found that you were an S, E, L, or F. Now we'll learn more about each type in Module 2.
I know you'd like more time, but I need that final report by Friday.
But you don't understand. The results I'm waiting for could greatly affect the outcome of the entire project. I don't feel comfortable moving ahead without those results.
Tim, you're the best researcher I've ever worked with. I trust your judgment, but I still need that report Friday. Okay, I can give you till 4 o'clock, but that's it.
Thanks. I promise it'll be worth waiting for.
Now for those that are an S or an L, see if this next scene is familiar.
Well, anyway, I could tell before I finished pitching the idea that she'd already decided it wasn't going to work. You know, I know it's different, but I think it's time we tried something new, you know?
Well, I think it's a great idea. Maybe she just needs a little organization.
Yeah? What do you mean?
Well, if you'd like, I could work on these sketches to help illustrate your idea, and then we could map out your idea on a timeline. That way she'd have a better picture of what you were wanting to do with it.
Oh, well, that's great. But are you sure you're going to have time to help me out?
Oh, no problem. It's a fantastic idea. I'd really like to work with you on it.
Yeah, hey, that's great.
Welcome back. It was cold, it was dark, and it was lonely in here without you. Glad to see you again. Okay, so when last we chatted, you had a directive and an affiliative score, and then you took those two scores, and you made a couple of points, and then you made a triangle out of that, and then I had you take that quadrants and label them as an S, an E, an L, or an F. So look at that again and see where your triangle is. Is it in the S, the E, or the L, or the F quadrant, okay? If it's in the S quadrant, we'd say you're an S. If it's in the E quadrant, we'd say you're an E. If it's in the L quadrant, we'd say you as an L. And if it was in the F quadrant, we would say you are an F. You want to find out a little bit more about yourself? You want to find out a little bit more about how some people see you? Look up in your profile, the page that has strengths and limitations written on it. Take a moment, I'll give you a moment, and look yourself up. Now then, was there any truth to what you just read? When you look at yourself under your strengths and limitations, is that you some of the time? Is it you a lot of the time? Is it you often? Now, you know and I know that as we look at the S, E, L, and F strengths and limitations, we see a little bit of ourselves in all of these, and we are. But we are also creatures of habit. You know, we've heard that phrase. And we do get into the habit of demonstrating certain behaviors. And we can change those habits and go into different behaviors as we grow and as we experience more of life and work. But for right now, you're in the quadrant that you are in. And what I'd like to do is to take a brief moment of your time and just kind of run through some of the strengths and limitations so you can see better how people see you. And also, we're going to be able to take from this how we can better see, evaluate other people. So for those of you who found your triangle in the S quadrant, for those of you who are S's, let's talk about your strengths and limitations for just a moment. S's, when people talk about you and they talk about your strengths, they say that you're persuasive, you're a risk taker, you're competitive, you pursue change. To put it in a nutshell, you're the kind of person who's always thinking, always thinking, always thinking. You got ideas, and they're good ideas. And you know why they're good ideas? Simple. You thought of them. That's why. Why, you never had such a thing as a bad idea. Now, S's, I am not for a moment going to stand here and tell you that your ideas are not good. But S's, have you ever heard the phrase, people judge you by your actions and not your intentions? S's, you know what? If you don't stay in control, what happens is people wind up judging you by your actions and not your ideas. And S's, when your buttons get pushed, how you react sometimes is you come across with your limitations. Pushy, intimidating, overbearing, reactive, manipulative, abrasive. You're the squeaky wheel trying to get the grease. And if you're squawking and yelling at people, what happens is they no longer want to listen to your ideas. They no longer want to pay any attention to what you have to say. And they're not going to say that anything you said is right. Why? Because they're now more concerned about protecting themselves because they don't like being yelled at, pushed at. Okay? S's, I'm just asking you to consider that in your attempts to make a modern day miracle happen, in your attempt to communicate with another person, if it doesn't work, what you might do is grab your SELF profile, open it up to the page of strengths and limitations, and then just ask yourself the very honest question, did I come across with my limitations more than with my strengths? Okay. How about the E's? E's, let's talk about you for a moment. E's, if you want a nutshell description of an E, here's what we would say. You are the kind of person who can get things done. Look at the strengths of an E. They're very organized, traditional, goal-oriented, very focused. They're very direct in their conversation. All of those behaviors are the behaviors that we associate with a person who wants to get things done. You see, they may not come up with a lot of ideas like the S's, but once an E lassos onto an idea, once they take ownership of an idea, they will see it through. Why? Because getting things done is very important to an E. E's. Sometimes people judge you by your actions and not your intentions. E's. Sometimes if you're not in control, your limiting behaviors are going to keep people from being as excited about getting things done. E. If you're ever working with some people and they don't seem to be all that hipped up and excited about getting things done like you are, grab your SELF profile, open it up to the page with the limitations and ask yourself, did I come across as dogmatic, stubborn, rigid, unapproachable, insensitive? Now, E's, let me explain why you will do that. Because you want to make sure that things get done, and as a result, you will hesitate about changing the way we do things because you know that if we continue to do it the way we've been doing it, it's going to get done, and that's what's very important to you. If an S should ever come up to an E and say, hey, I got an idea on how we can do this differently, an E very characteristically will say something like, hey, it ain't broke. Let's not try to fix it. The reason why E is talking like that is because they know that if we do it the same way we've been doing it, it's going to get done, and to them, getting things done is mucho importante. Okay? L's. L's. If you'll look where the triangle for an L is, you'll see that they're very affiliative. They have a very high need to be with people. Look at the characteristics of an L. They're very people characteristics. They're very team-oriented. They're caring, devoted, enthusiastic, helpful, accessible, trusting, clean, thrifty, loyal, brave, reverent. L's are Boy Scouts. They're Girl Scouts, okay? They're very people-oriented, okay? How could you not like an L, you know? L's, I'm asking you to consider that sometimes people do not judge you by your intentions of how much you want to work with people, but instead they judge you by your actions, just like everybody else. And under your limitations, L, I'd like you to note especially two of them, where we say that you are indecisive and vulnerable. And let me explain real quickly. By indecisive, what we mean, L's, is you will hesitate to make a decision by yourself. Why? Because you don't want people to think that you're not working with them. And L's, sometimes, you know, we just don't have the luxury of being able to get together with a group of people and arrive at a consensus. Sometimes L's, people will come up to you and they'll say, what do you think we should do? And rather than say, well, I don't know, why don't we all get together and have a meeting? Sometimes you have to make the decision. And then you can always come back to the team later and say, here's what I said. But sometimes people need an answer from you. And the reason why I want to focus on vulnerable for just a moment, Els, is this. Your skin is a little thinner than the skin of an S and an E and an F. To say it another way, your feelings get hurt a little bit easier. And if you're not careful, people are going to take advantage of that. I'm not asking you to become coarse and rude and crude and socially unacceptable. I'm just simply asking you to be aware that sometimes, you know, you have to kind of develop a little bit of a tough skin so people aren't so easy to get to you. Okay? F's. Let's talk about F's for just a moment. Okay? You'll notice that in the quadrant of the F's, they're not so affiliative. They're not so much people-oriented, but they still have a tendency to want to get things done. F's are the kind of people, well, look at the strengths of an F. They're the kind of people who are meticulous, factual, reserved, meticulous, calm. These are the kind of people who are very neat and everything has its place, and they're usually the kind of people who are very analytical. I mean, if you ask them to measure something, they will measure it. They will measure 800 ways to Sunday, and you can count on each and every measurement being exactly correct. Why? Because they are that way. Now, F's. Sometimes, people judge you by your actions and not your intentions. F's. Sometimes people judge you by your actions and not your neatness or your accuracy. And F's, I'm asking you to consider that if you're ever in a situation where maybe people don't appreciate your neatness and your accuracy, you might get your SELF profile, open it up to the limitations and ask yourself, did I come across with more of my limitations than I came across with my strengths? And F's, under your limitations, would you please note the first two, where we say that you're slow to get things done and perfectionistic. And allow me to explain, because I know F's, you're looking at me right now and you're thinking, what's the problem? Okay. The problem with this is, the problem with F's is this. You are living in a world that is full of S's, E's, and L's, and they are not as neat or as accurate as you. And sometimes they don't need things exactly correct. All they need is a ballpark figure. All they need is just a generalization. Sometimes not everything has to be neat and exact. It just simply has to be there. And I'm asking you to consider, to give a little bit, and to say, this is not as important to be as neat and accurate, so I can go ahead and let him have this information a little bit ahead of time. The reason why we say that you're slow to get things done is because in your desire to make sure that everything is neat and accurate, you will put off reporting. You'll put off giving people information because you're waiting for this other report to come in. You want to check this other journal that's going to come out tomorrow, and I just want to briefly look over this article before I make my report. It's not that you're not doing your work. You are doing your work. It's just that you're always wanting to make sure your work is so accurate that sometimes you're slow to get your work done. Now, I want to take another moment here with the F's, and I want to give them a little bit of extra attention here. Because F's, if you will look under your limitations, you will see that one of the limitations that we have written down here is dull. And you cannot turn to a person and say, hey, you're dull, have a nice day. Okay. So F's, allow me to explain why we call you dull. Now, F's, bear with me for just a moment here, okay? It's going to be uncomfortable for about a minute, but I promise you, you're going to come out of this looking pretty good, okay? Now, here is an F. For example, here's an F, and they've got a drink in their hand, okay? Now, here is an F, all right, at a party, having the absolute time of their life. And F's, because we don't see you moving around a lot, we don't see you talking a lot in our culture, right or wrong, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, it's just the way we are, we will judge you as not being very witty, very clever, okay? We'll say that you are dull. Now, I'm not saying it's right, I'm not saying it's wrong, it's just the way it is. People do judge us by our actions. So F's, I'm just asking you to consider that that is a judgment call that people make about you. Now, to the strengths of an F, I will offer to you that for many of us, if we have a bunch of numbers, for example, thrown out in front of us, all that most of us will see is just a bunch of numbers, but not F's. They will see patterns and rhythms and sequences and ratios and proportions, and we look at them and we go, God, how do you see that? And they go, I just do. Because what they may lack in verbal activity and physical activity, okay, they more than make up for in mental activity. Although, nonetheless, F's. This is just a suggestion from me to you, and you can accept it or reject it. But if I was you, what I would do is someday at work, while you're at your computer terminal, you're at your desk, and you're doing really meticulous work, and nobody knows you're there because you're just so absorbed into your work, you wait until it's really busy at work, and then just scoot yourself back from your desk and without any warning go, yes, 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 and then just sit right back down as if nothing happened. And then let them wonder, what's going on. Okay? You know and I know that as we look at this SELF profile, we see ourselves as a little bit of all of these, and we are because we're well-rounded. But I'm asking you to consider that we are also, to an extent, creatures of habit, and we get into the habit of demonstrating one preferred set of behaviors. Now, I'm asking you to consider that this SELF profile is giving you an idea of how people see you, both in your strengths and your limitations. But there's more that we can use this SELF profile for. What I would like you to consider is a basic lesson from psychology. And psychologists say this, that behavior is an indicator of a need. This is so important. If you've never gotten a tattoo and you're thinking about getting one, take this down to the tattoo artist and have them tattoo it on your arm. Behavior is an indicator of a need, okay? Now, to say it in a very unfancy way, what it says is this. The way that people act will give you a clue of what they want. For example, suppose that over here in the corner is a water fountain, okay, and I start walking towards the water fountain. The behavior of me walking towards the water fountain gives you a clue that I must need a drink of water. Very good, okay? I'm asking you to consider that the way that a person acts will give you a clue. And let me just take a little extra information here and give it to you. In the S quadrant, I want to give you what is one of the biggest needs of an S, okay? One of the biggest needs of an S is recognition. If you have a person who is standing in front of you and they're acting like an S, that behavior is telling you that they want some recognition. If they're being pushy, intimidating, overbearing, reactive, manipulative, abrasive, they're acting like a squeaky wheel trying to get the grease, they want some recognition. I'll give you an example, okay, real quickly. Suppose that I've been in the doctor's office and I've been having to wait and to wait and to wait and to wait. Then I come up to the poor receptionist, okay, and I bam on the table and I say, how much longer are you people going to make me wait? My time is worth money too. I'm going to bill you. Now, if the receptionist begins to explain to me, well, Mr. Wright, the doctor's in the emergency room because they're delivering a baby. Do you think I care? No. Why? Because I hate babies? No. Because I've not had a need of mine fulfilled. If you have a person who's acting pushy, intimidating, overbearing, reactive, manipulative, abrasive, you've got to appeal to their needs. You've got to speak, you've got to act to them so they will hear what is important to them. And one of the biggest things that are important to an S is recognition. So the receptionist could say, Mr. Wright, your time is worth money and we are embarrassed that you've had to wait. Now, is that going to turn the person around 180 degrees instantly? No. But hopefully it will, but usually it doesn't. But what it does begin to do is to let them realize, uh-oh, you're not the barrier that I thought you were going to be. And they're more apt to begin to listen to you. And then you can explain, and the doctor is delivering a baby in the emergency room. In fact, if you'll just hold your horses, Mr. Wright, I'm going to call them up. We're just going to name that baby after you right now. Okay. You're giving them recognition. Suppose that you know a person well enough that you can diagnose them, let us say, as an E. You know that they're the kind of people who get things done. One way that you can speak to an E so they will hear what is important to them is to say, hey, Debbie, if you got a minute, I want to run this by you and see what you think of it. What are you doing? You're letting them have some control, letting them have some say. You're speaking to them so they will hear and see what is important to them. And this will work whether it's eyeball to eyeball or whether it's ear to ear, whether it's on the phone. An L. If you know a person well enough to know that they're an L, one way you can kind of get them to listen to you is to speak to them so they will hear what is important to them. And one way to do that is to sit back and say, hey, Dion, if you got a moment, we'd like to have you at the meeting next Wednesday because we'd like your participation. Okay? You're speaking to them so they will hear what is important to you. Okay? An F. One way that you can speak to an F so they will hear and see what is important to them, and what is important to them is to be neat and or right, is you might come up to them and say, Greg, listen, we need you to take a moment and look at this because we need this to go off without a hitch, and we'd like to make sure we've done this correctly. All that you're doing is speaking to them so they will hear what is important to them. Now, the cynic will say, all you're doing is just telling me to suck up to people. And no, I'm not. Because what I'm saying is that you can speak to people in a manner that is honest and genuine so that they will hear and see what is important to them. And when people hear and see what's important to them, when they hear and see their needs being met, they're going to respond to you a lot differently than just sucking up to them. Okay? Let me give you a case study here, okay? Suppose that I walk to work one day, and lo and behold, the new member of my team or my boss happens to be a young black woman who is tall and Muslim. Okay? Now then, I'm sitting to myself and I'm going, whoa, how am I ever going to be able to talk to her? How am I ever going to be able to communicate to her? I mean, she's probably thinking the same thing. She's thinking, oh man, middle-aged white guy and pudgy at that. You know, how's she going to be able to talk to me? I'm going to ask you to consider that we can figure out how to speak to each other, and it has nothing to do with race, creed, or religion. Okay? I mean, I can read all of my life, and I will never know what it's like to be black. I will read all of my life, and I will still never know what it's like to be, well, young. I mean, I remember some of that, okay? What do I know about being a woman? Nothing. I mean, there was that cross-dressing phase years ago, but it didn't teach me anything, okay? And what do I know about being tall? Nothing. And what do I know about a Muslim? Not a lot. Now, I can read and read and read and read, but I'm asking you to consider that I don't have to. I'm not saying those parameters are not important, but they do not give me a clue of what the person needs. You see, you'll never be able to go to the store and buy a book that says, needs. Open it up. Page 37, needs of a middle-aged white guy in management. Page 88, the needs of a tall young black woman who's a Muslim. You know, you'll never be able to find a book like that. Why? Because those do not give us a clue of what people need. What does give us a clue is their behavior. And we can begin to kind of look at their behavior and make a good guess. Okay? Now, I'm going to simplify the SELF profile a little bit here. I'm going to ask you to consider that if you don't know what a person is, you know, like if I call up and you don't know me from Adam, what are you going to do? Assume that I am an S. When in doubt, assume the person is an S. Most of the population at any one time is an S, which is saying that at any one time, most of the population wants some recognition. If you think about it, the need for control, the need to belong, the need to be with people, the need to be neat and or right are just more specific ways of giving people recognition. Okay? Let me just simplify S's, L's, and F's just a little bit more for you here, okay? Suppose that you're in traffic, okay, and you got an S behind you. Suppose that you're in the left-hand turn lane, okay, and you're in the lead car, okay, and you got an S behind you, and that light turns green. Within a millisecond, the S is going to be on their horn. Beep, 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 move it, okay? Okay? If you have behind you an E, and you look in your rearview mirror, here's how the E is going to be acting. Telling you, make the turn and go. You know, they got to be in control, okay? And if you got an L behind you, and they're in their car, and you look in your rearview mirror, here's what they're going to do. Because why? Because they're waiting for you, and then once you get started, we're all going to make this turn together as a team, okay? And if you got an F behind you, and you look in your rearview mirror, here's what they're going to do. They're going to be going, and they're going to be looking at their clock to see how long it took you to make that turn to 66 yards. You know? I mean, they're just that analytical, very neat, and very organized, okay? Let me give you another way of sort of unpsychologically looking at S's, E's, L's, and F's, okay? Suppose that you had a whole bunch of S's in a room. What would you have? A party. Okay? You'd get nothing done, but you'd have a heck of a good time. Okay? If you had a bunch of E's in a room together, what would you have? You'd have war. Because they'd all be wanting the biggest desk, you know, the most control. You know, I want the phone with the most colors on it. Okay? If you had a bunch of L's in a room, what would you have? Well, they would all get together, you know, and huddle and sort of just talk with each other because they'd all get close. Okay? And if you had a bunch of F's in a room, what would you have? A perfect score. Because they would be very accurate and very neat and analytical, okay? I'm asking you to consider that these behaviors can give us an idea of what people respond to. And I'm asking you to develop that ability and even put the ideas right by your telephone, okay? In your workbook, you're going to have some turn-ons and turn-offs. Take the turn-ons. It's a kind of a quick and easy list of what you can do to get a person to respond to you, okay? So as a result, you can speak to them and act to them so they will hear and see what is important to them. Take that list and put it right by your telephone or put it by your daily planner so you can see that, okay? Why? Because that behavior that they're demonstrating in front of you is giving you a clue of what they need. Behavior is an indicator of a need. The way people act will give you a clue of what they want. One of the major uses of the SELF profile is that you're able to interpret in behavior and interpret in a way that gives you a clue of what a person needs. And for those of you who are curious as to what is one of the biggest needs of a middle-aged white guy in management, I will tell you, it's donuts. Okay? Now, we are going to continue to develop the SELF profile so we can better interpret behavior and better understand how our behavior is being interpreted by other people. Now, I've only got a few seconds left in this module to convince you to come on in to the very next module, okay? And in order to do that, let me just give you some blatant recognition, okay? Gentlemen, you are as handsome and as in shape as you think you are. And ladies, you are as pretty and as graceful as we know that you are. I, on the other hand, am middle-aged and pudgy, and you would make me look so much better if you would keep me in your company for the next module. So, in just a second or two, we'll be back together again.
Each personality type has strengths and weaknesses. An S is a risk-taker, confident and outgoing. Their limitations are that they can be pushy, overbearing, and impatient. An E is practical, organized, and hard-working. An E's limitations are that they can be dogmatic, stubborn, and insensitive. An L is team-oriented, caring, and sensitive. Their limitations are that they can be indecisive and impractical. An F is meticulous, calm, and has high standards. Their limitations are that they can be slow in getting things done, perfectionistic, and dull. Refer to your workbook for more detailed listings. By understanding the different personality types, you will be more able to hear and see what is important to the person you are trying to communicate with. An S wants recognition. An E wants control. L likes participation. An F needs to be neat and/or right. When in doubt, always assume a person is an S, since everyone wants some form of recognition.
Welcome back again, and nice to see you again. Okay, so what happens? One day you're at work or at your home, and you don't have your SELF profile handy, and suddenly you got to make a miracle happen. Or what happens if you've got an SELF profile handy, but you can't get the other person to sit down and take it so you can figure out, are they an S, an E, an L, or an F? Oh, wait a minute. Have you lost weight? You look like you've lost weight. And you've gained some muscle tone, too. Have you? You haven't? Oh, you sure look like you've lost weight. Now, what did I just do? I just gave you some recognition. Now, we'll talk later on whether or not it was genuine. But the point I'm trying to make is this, okay? Is that when in doubt, give the person some recognition. An S, an E, an L, or an F, the world's full of them. But if you're not too sure what to do, and if you're ever caught without your SELF profile, and you're wondering, oh, what are they? Go with the odds. Assume they're an S, and then give them some recognition, okay? I'm asking you to consider, again, that when you talk about a person's need for control, or when you talk to them so they'll hear that they belong, or you talk to them so they will see that you recognize their neatness and their accuracy, all that you're really doing is just giving them more specific forms of recognition, which makes me think of something else. How could I forget this? Do you want to know what the ultimate act of recognition is? Check this out. It's when you listen. The singular biggest psychological need that psychologists say that we have is to be listened to. So if you want to give a person some powerful recognition, give them and let them know that you're listening to them, okay? It is the ultimate act of recognition. At work, it's the ultimate act of respect, and at home, it's an ultimate act of affection. It's very powerful when we listen to people, okay? I'll give you an extra little tip here real quickly. Now, I'm not saying that listening is easy. It is a learned skill, like so many skills are, okay? But what I'd like you to consider is that if you're at work and it's eyeball to eyeball with a person, and you want to begin to convey to them that you're listening to them, check this out. Just lean forward slightly. Now, I'm not saying hunker way over, okay? I'm just saying lean forward slightly. Again, people do judge us by our actions and not our intentions, and that body language action lets them know that you're not giving them the cold shoulder. In fact, when you lean forward slightly, it's like you're at the edge of your seat in anticipation of what they're going to say. The singular biggest psychological need that people have is to be listened to.
While we all have different styles, everyone wants some form of recognition. Keep that in mind as you watch this final scene.
I'd like to take a moment to congratulate everyone on a job well done. I think we all deserve a big pat on the back for pulling this campaign together.
It was a good idea to wait for that information from the second focus group. It made a difference when I wrote the advertisements.
Well, I was worried that it might affect how you treated the concept.
You and Diane did a great job on that concept. I'm glad you convinced me.
Well, I think we did a good job. I knew we could do it.
Now, I'm going to ask you to consider another thought here real quickly to kind of turbocharge your ability of letting people hear and see that they are right. And that is to catch them doing something right. We've all heard this stupid phrase, and it's this: the customer is always right. And that's bunk. Whatever person came up with that never stood eyeball to eyeball and ear to ear with the customer. Now, that phrase is ludicrous. Let me give you a phrase from the Navy that is not ludicrous and will be helpful, more helpful to you, so you can catch people doing something right. And here it is, from the Navy, okay? They say this: the chief may not always be right, but the chief is always the chief. The boss, the coworker, the staff member, the customer, the spouse, the kid, may not always be right, but they're always the boss, the coworker, the staff, the spouse, the kid. You catch them doing something right. You got to be looking not for what they've done wrong, but for what they've done right. So why? So you can talk to them and let them know that. That is another form of recognition. Let me give you something extra here real quickly, okay? This is extra free stuff, okay? It's a gift from me to you. I'll show you how you can give people a compliment that means something. For example, a lot of compliments are destroyed. A lot of catching people doing something right is negated because we use the word but. You were really good, but. And as soon as they hear that word but, they realize, you were schmoozing them. You were setting them up. You weren't sincere. I will show you a technique, and it works. Try it. Instead of using the word but, use the word and, A-N-D. You were really good, and I have a question as to why you hang up the phone on people and curse at them. The idea is that you're using the word and not the word but. The word but in the English language is a trigger word, okay? Another way that you can give people some recognition, if they're an E, is you can say something like, hey, good decision, If they're an L, you can say, whoa, you really helped out a lot. They're hearing that sense of belonging. If they're a person who is an F, if they're very neat and very right, you can say something like, hey, good eye, glad you caught that. And let me give you one word that works for an S and an E and an L and an F, and that's thanks. We dismiss that phrase a lot because you say, it doesn't mean anything anymore. Well, the way a lot of people say it, it doesn't mean, thank you, next. It doesn't really work, okay? Say it like you mean it. Say, hey, thanks. That helps. I'm asking you to consider that works for any of them. Okay? In order to use the SELF profile to its maximum ability, I think what you have to do is, one, learn it, and that's what we're here for, and then you got to practice it and practice it. It takes some time. But take the time, so as a result, when you speak to people, you will be able to be more clear to them what it is that you're saying to them. It's a way for you to kind of plan to speak before you talk. Okay? There is here's something else extra. Gosh, I don't know who came up with this, but there is an acronym, TACT, T-A-C-T, stands for Talk After Careful Thinking. And the SELF profile will help you to become more tactful. And that's got to be a major compliment. Somebody ever comes up to you and says, you handled that tactfully, that is a major pat on your back. In the very first module, I made a point about it's not important that you win the argument, it's important that you stay in control. You've got to stay in control. And when people come up and say that you handled that situation tactfully, you handled that person tactfully, that is a major pat on the back. Okay? And also, I think, too, that the SELF profile will work provided that the recognition that you give them is honest. When I made the remark a little bit ago about when I said, hey, have you lost weight? Hey, you're looking like you've gained some muscle tone. Did you buy into it? Not at all. Why? Because it wasn't genuine. You knew it was not genuine. If you want to cause the SELF profile to backfire on you, here's all you got to do. Lie. If you lie, it'll backfire on you, I promise you. Don't lie. It builds character when you don't, and it develops your verbal and your people skills when you don't lie. Tell them the truth. Catch them doing something right. Give them some recognition. Listen. Give them some control. Hey, what do you think? Let them know they belong. Wow, you've been very helpful. Neat and accurate. They go, this went off without a hitch, and we owe it in large part because of your good eye for detail. Okay? Human behavior, please remember, human behavior is not so neat and so efficient that people respond right away, nor do they even sometimes respond. Okay? The fact of the matter is, sometimes they won't. You give, and they don't give you anything back. Okay? But if Bob can respond, your difficult people can respond. It's just a matter of doing it. You've got to take the step. You've got to kind of make the olive branch. You've got to kind of do the first act to see if they'll begin to come around. I know this is a cliche, and I hate cliches, but on the other hand, there's a lot of truth to a lot of cliches. Have you ever heard this one? What goes around comes around. You bet it does. And I'm asking you to consider that holds true in conversation. You give a little, who knows? They might give a little bit back. And if they don't, that's okay. Why? Because human behavior is not so neat and so efficient that people respond right away or sometimes even respond at all. But as a result, you've been able to stay in control of how you're communicating to the other person. And if you start staying in control better of how you communicate to another person, you're going to wind up staying in control better of how you communicate to yourself. And as a result, you're able to handle the stress better, the anger better. You're not getting so bent out of shape so easy because you're able to stay in control of how you're speaking to yourself. Okay? People will respond to you. Why? Because you have the power to get them to respond to you. Let me give you a thought here real quickly. Imagine how hard it would be to communicate to another person if you could not speak. Okay? If you can speak, and if you'll stay in control of how you speak, your ability to communicate is a whole lot easier and can be extremely effective, provided that you will stay in control of how you speak to them. Okay? And one way that you can stay in control is to force yourself to be thinking, are they an S, an E, an L, or an F? What clues are their behaviors giving me? And also to catch them doing something right. Okay? After you begin to become more familiar with the SELF material, in fact, now is a good time, what you might do is go back and practice this on the people that you know. I'm not saying you have to go out and work with Attila the Hun, right away. What you might do is kind of set yourself up a little bit and work with the people you know at home or the people you know at work and begin to kind of, say, well, I'm going to guess that the person's an S, an E, an L, or an F. I've been doing this for at least 7 years, okay? And I will tell you that I no longer go up and think, are they an S, an E, an L, or an F? What I do is I listen for the clues, and then I'm thinking as a bet they're an S, an E, an L, or an F. And when in doubt, assume they are an S. You betcha. Way to go. Very good. To be able to speak and act to another person so they will see and hear what is important to them is an incredible verbal and people skill. And it works whether it's eyeball to eyeball or whether it's ear to ear, whether it's face to face or whether it's on the phone. It's an incredible skill. You know what you're doing here really is this, is you are developing another way of communicating. One of the reasons why sometimes people have a hard time getting people to accept what they're doing or to realize how much effort they're putting forth is because we're not developing additional communication styles. This SELF profile is a major tool that you can use to help develop additional communication styles, okay? In order for people to appreciate what you're doing, you have got to stay in control, okay? You've got to stay in control. How do you handle difficult people when they're pushing your buttons? How do you handle difficult people when they're squawking at you over the telephone or when they're leering at you in their eyes? How do you handle difficult people? You stay in control. If you stay in control, you're able to think. And if you're able to think, you're able to be able to say, is this person an S, an E, an L, or an F? You're able to think and to realize the behaviors that they're giving you, and you're able to remember, oh, yeah, psychology tells us that behavior is an indicator of a person's need. And what is this behavior telling me that they need? Recognition, control, to belong, to be neat and or right. It's fundamental. I want to make a visual here if I can in my hands, but I'm going to ask you to consider that most people go through life in their business relationships, in their personal relationships, and when somebody ticks them off or when some situation gets them upset, here's how they act. They just go, bam, knee-jerk response. Whatever flies out of their mouth, they just shoot off their mouth. What I want you to do is to use the SELF profile so you will develop this extraordinary ability that when somebody or some event ticks you off, you pause and think, and then you pick the appropriate action. There's a whole lot of people out there who don't pause and think. They don't speak tactfully. They just simply shoot off their mouth. One of the reasons why they're not developing additional communication styles is because they put that skill on autopilot. Don't you dare do that. You know more about speaking to people than most people will ever know. This is an extraordinary skill. Okay? Another way that we communicate, in addition to the words that we use, and I know you know this, but let's review it. Another way that we communicate to people, in addition to the words that we use, is our tone of voice and our body language. The numbers, I think, are something like this. 7% of how we communicate are the words that we use. 37% of how we communicate is our tone of voice. 56%, over half, of how we communicate to people is our body language. 37% of how we communicate is tone of voice. The manner in which you speak determines the manner in which people respond. Don't ever forget it. You can absolutely control, you can absolutely modify other people's behavior by the way that you speak to them. If I yell at you and you yell back at me, besides not staying in control, you're giving up a huge amount of power that you have to modify my behavior by your tone of voice, okay? Don't forget it. Communication, making miracles happens is words, tone of voice, and body language. Just another quick thought, if I may, here real quickly. This is just personal. You may accept it or reject it. But a lot of people say that whenever we talk to people over the telephone, there is no body language. And that is bunk. This telephone is like a stethoscope. You know when when you go into the doctor's office and they put that thing in their ears, and then they lay it up against your chest wall? If you think about it, what they're really doing is they're putting this instrument up against their brain. Whenever you pick up the phone, you're putting that phone right by your brain. And it is brain to brain with another person. That's a very close business position to be in. And that telephone magnifies you dramatically. And you act as if the person is smack dab in front of you. And your body language will be different, and you will project differently. And you will come across different. And by the way that you give a person eye contact over the telephone, you should put a big old healthy mirror smack dab in front of you. Because as you see yourself in the mirror, that's exactly how you're communicating to the person on the other end of the line. And you got to look at yourself and say, whoa, miracle. Or otherwise you're going to say, whoa, disaster. You got to stay very much in control. I am not saying that every time you use this tool it works. I don't know any tool that works 100%. I am not saying that if you use this, you and the other person will walk arm in arm off into the sunset. But what I am saying is that it works a lot of the time, and the more you practice it, the more it will work. Why? Because people are hearing and seeing their needs being met. And all of this makes me think of something else. And I want to throw this in here too real quickly, okay? Anybody here, you ever had to work at a job that if you didn't hate it, at least you felt as though you were not appreciated for your efforts? Everybody has. Certainly I have, okay? I'm asking you to consider you can use the SELF profile to help you get through some days that are kind of tough. Now here's why. You've done your SELF profile. You figured yourself out to be predominantly either an S, an E, or an L, or an F. And one way that you can make a job a better job is that you can start saying to yourself, what do I need to like my job? If I am an S, I need recognition. So fit some recognition into your job. If nobody at work will give you some recognition, then give yourself your own little ribbon, okay? No rule against that, okay? I'm asking you to consider that if you're an E, and that if you're at work, if you are an E, and if you're at work, what you might do is give yourself a little bit of control of your day. Maybe you're going to set some priorities on your own, on your time, if you can't on the company's time, okay? But the idea is give yourself a little bit of control. If you're an L, and you're at work, and your job is sort of testing your skills and your abilities, not so much your skill and ability as much as just testing your patience, then give yourself a little bit of belonging. Get yourself up from time to time and go over and say hi to people. Don't become a gossip. Okay? But just come around and just talk to people. Don't isolate yourself. And if you're an F kind of a person, then by golly, when you can, interject an extra dose of neatness and accuracy in your work. Okay? Why? Because it's important to you. You've got to have your needs fulfilled too. Okay? Let me take a couple of extra moments here and just talk to you like somebody who has done more than a few business seminars in his career. Let me give you an observation. I think the biggest mistake that people make when they attempt to learn something is they attempt to learn too much too fast. And what I would like you to consider strongly, especially with this SELF profile, but frankly with any body of knowledge that you're working with, I want you to think big, and I'd like you to start small. Let me redo that, okay? I want you to think big, but I want you to start small. Here's a suggestion. Go through the SELF profile that you have in front of you. Fast forward or reverse yourself through your learning tool that you have in front of you now, and find yourself not more than 5 ideas, not more than 5 tools that you're going to practice with, okay? No more than 5. It can be 1, 2, 3, 4, but no more than 5, just a handful of ideas. And write them out on a piece of paper and keep them in your pocket or keep them in your wallet or keep them by the telephone. And all you're doing is just remind yourself, these are the skills that I want to practice on and practice on and practice on. And then after you have assimilated those skills, after they're part and parcel of how you conduct yourself, then go back through your profile. Go back through the learning tool that you have in front of you here and pick out another 1, 2, 3, 4, but no more than 5 at a time. Think big, but start small. We are not the same persons that we used to be. And you know why? In large part because we have continued to learn. I believe it was Ralph Waldo Emerson who made the remark that the mind, once it is expanded, can never return to its previous size. Guess what? You're not the same person now that you were when you started watching this module or when you started watching this training series. Why? Because you've been learning. And once you learn something, you cannot forget it. Now, you can choose not to develop it. You can choose not to practice with it, but that is your choice. You have learned it. It is just a matter of now practicing it, honing your skills. A guy by the name of, a speaker by the name of Charlie Tremendous Jones, is a real energetic speaker. He used to have a statement that went like this, and believe me, I cannot do it justice. Only Charlie can do it justice, but it was an extraordinary message, and I want to give it to you. He used to say this. He said, you will be a different person 5 years from now because of the people that you meet and the books that you read. The people that you meet and the books that you read. The problem with the people we meet is we cannot take them home with us. But how we can take them home with us, how we can take their information home with us, how we can take their ideas home with us is in the books that we read. You have been sitting in front of your VCR, your TV, and you have been using this training module to develop your skills. You have read a lot of books by watching this series. I am asking you to don't stop learning. A philosopher by the name of Joseph Campbell has an incredible remark. It really hit me to the core, and I offer it to you because I think it's neat. He said that learning is an act of rejuvenation. Learning is an act of reinventing yourself. And whenever you learn, you're rejuvenating yourself. You get excited about it. I tell you the people that I am simultaneously scared of and sad for, and that are the people who think that they can no longer learn and they have quit learning. Don't you stop. I will offer to you that I think I represent a casualty that a lot of people go through in this technical age that we live in, and that is we have kind of put our skills and our learning for our verbal skills on hold, on autopilot. Don't ever stop developing your organizational skills. Don't ever stop developing your organizational skills, your technical skills, or your people skills. Don't you dare stop. Now, Joseph Campbell made a remark that made me think of one. Now, Joseph Campbell's remark was, learning is an act of reinventing oneself. Randall Wright has this remark. Learning is an act of belief in yourself. Whenever you sit down and say, I'm going to learn this, or I'm going to try and get better at this, what you're fundamentally saying to yourself is this: I still believe I got it. I still believe I have a potential. I still believe I have a future. I still believe I've got skills and abilities. And don't you ever stop believing in yourself. You constantly continue to learn. Now, in order to be able to apply these skills, you're fundamentally going to have to take a chance. Because, you know, it might work and it might not. You know, you go up and you go, oh, I think this person's an S. And they go, hey, nice tie. And it doesn't work. You go, oh, man, I'm not going to do this anymore. Don't you dare. Give yourself a chance to make a couple of mistakes. Give yourself a chance to learn. Nobody said you have to be perfect. You just simply have to, or at least I'm saying, that you have to be constantly learning. Look, take a chance. Whenever you take a chance, especially if you're trying to learn, I believe that what I see is a demonstration of how much a person believes in themselves. I'll give you an example, and it applies to everybody in this room, and you've done it, each of you, a bunch of times, okay? Here's an example of how taking a chance is a belief in your abilities and your belief in your skills, even your future, okay? So here you are. You're in a hurry. You go into the grocery store, okay? Now, you're in a hurry. So rather than get the basket, what you get is the, rather than get the cart, what you get is the basket, okay? You tuck it under your arm, and what do? You run lickety-split through the aisles, and you start putting items into the basket, okay? Now then, you come around the edge of the grocery store, okay? And you're looking for an empty checkout lane, and blast of luck, all of the checkout lanes are just chock full of people. And you find yourself standing off by the side of the grocery store, and you're going, Nyaka! Don't these people have homes? You know? And then you see in the express lane, this guy standing there doing nothing, okay? And the express lane says, like express lane, 10 items or less. And you've got 23 items in your basket if you got one. What do? You take a chance. You run right up to the guy. You plop your basket right in front of him. Do not give him eye contact, okay? And then you start putting the items on the conveyor belt, okay? Why do you take the chance? I'll tell you why. Because from here to here, for just a split second in time, you had a thought that went like this. Yeah, I think I can pull it off. And I'm asking you to say it back and say, you know, I didn't let this grocery store clerk and express lane control how much I believe I can do, my future, my abilities. And I'm asking you to consider the same way. Don't stop learning. And in order to learn, you fundamentally have to take a chance, okay? It is worth it. Learning is worth the risk.
In Module 3, you learned how to put the SELF profile to use. Practice by learning to recognize certain traits in people you already know. When you're not sure what style a person is, assume they're an S, because everyone appreciates recognition. Don't focus on the limitations of a person. Look at what a person does right, not what they do wrong. Giving recognition for doing right is a powerful way to communicate. Continue with positive communication by using the word and instead of but. Use tact. Talk after careful thinking. Finally, remember that learning is an act of believing in yourself. By learning to use the SELF profile in your communications with others, you are believing in yourself and helping to build relationships.
Now, I have a final wish I would like to give to you, and that wish is this. I wish that you were at work one day or at home one day, and somebody comes up and they sort of sidle up to you, and they say, "Hey, got a minute?" You go, "Yeah." And they say, "Look, you seem to be pretty good at talking to people so they will listen to you. You seem to be pretty good at talking to people so you can make your point. Teach me, how do you do that?" And then just kind of let this toolbox up here whirl around a little bit, and get a couple of ideas, and then give them a couple of ideas, and maybe even let them have a chance to kind of practice it on you. What are you doing? You're teaching. I believe the ultimate act of respect is when you teach another person. And what you're doing is you're giving them respect. You say, I believe in your abilities, I believe in your potential, I believe in your future. And here, let me teach you. Okay? You have allowed me to teach you, and for that I thank you, because I truly enjoy it. Okay? You have passed the video. You've scored 100%. You've got yourself an A. Okay? My name is Randall Wright, and thank you. Okay? Welcome. Welcome.
If you've enjoyed watching this program, please contact us about the rest of our 60-minute training series.